Alrighty, today we're going to factor polynomials, or more specifically trinomials, but this time our leading coefficient is going to be greater than 1. So here's an example, 12x squared minus 4x minus 8, and our goal is to get that into two sets of parentheses like we did previously. So here are going to be 5 different steps that we're going to follow. The first one is always going to be to factor out any greatest common factor, if applicable. It's not always going to be possible to do that, but that would always be our first step. Second step will be to multiply the leading coefficient and the constant. From there, we're going to list the factor pairs that we get from the product in step 2. Step 4 is going to be choosing a factor pair that will add or subtract to be that middle term. And then the 5th step will be to divide each constant that we've chosen by the leading coefficient and then simplify if we can. If we can't simplify, then the denominator of that fraction is going to go out in front of our x. So let's do this example, 12x squared minus 4x minus 8. First step says factor out any greatest common factor. Well, you can take a 4 out of each of these terms, so that looks like this. It leaves us with a 3x squared minus x minus 2. It's very important that we keep that 4 there because it's still part of our problem. Okay, step 2 says to multiply our leading coefficient and our constant. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. And then step 3 says to list the factor pairs of 6. So we have 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Step 4 says to choose the pair that's going to add or subtract to this middle term, to this middle constant. So we're looking for something that's going to add or subtract to -1. And 2 and 3 will give us that. So we set up step 5 with, I guess we can do this in step 4 or step 5. Putting our numbers, our factors, into those parentheses. So this step goes just like we have factored previously. Both of our parentheses get an x in the front. A minus in the back says that we're going to have 1 plus and 1 minus. And then our larger factor, so 3 in this case, will go with that middle sign. So that's how I knew it should be x minus 3 and x plus 2. So now step 5 says that we're going to take each of these constants that we've just plugged in and divide by our leading coefficient. Well, our leading coefficient is 3. So we're going to divide each of those by 3 to look like this. Okay, then it says simplify if you can. Well, we know that 2 over 3 doesn't simplify, so it says if it doesn't simplify, this denominator is going to come in front of the x. So all I've done in this next step is take that 3 and put it out in front. Okay, so that becomes a 3x plus 2. In our second set of parentheses, 3 divided by 3 simplifies to 1. So this second set of parentheses would be x minus 1. If you were to refoil, that'd be a 3x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 2. And minus 3x plus 2x is a minus 1x. Okay, and then you could distribute a 4 to get back to our very original. Let's do another example. Here we have a 9x squared minus 22x plus 8. Step 1 says factor out a GCF. Well, we don't have anything to factor out. Step 2 says multiply leading coefficient and constant. Step 3 says list the factors of that product that we just got. So here are our factor pairs of 72. Step 4 says pick the pair that's going to add or subtract to 22. Well, 4 and 18 go ahead and add to 22. So we're going to start our parentheses, x in front. This plus in the back says they'll both match. Both signs will match that sign. So I have an x minus, and then I put 18 and 4 in there. We have to divide by our leading coefficient, which is 9, and then simplify if we can. Well, we know 18 divided by 9 turns into a 2. 4 over 9 does not simplify, so that denominator comes out front. So we have x minus 2 and a 9x minus 4. Again, you can always check your work to verify that you get this when you FOIL. Okay, one other thing to introduce is solving a trinomial. So we've practiced a lot on factoring, but sometimes it'll say solve, factor and solve. So what that means is we're going to set our original trinomial to 0, and then when we get it factored, we'll set each of those pieces to 0. So here we have x squared plus 14x plus 40. Factors to be x plus 4, x plus 10. Notice we have this equals 0. So now in order to solve means we're looking for what x equals. So I said x plus 4 equal to 0 and x plus 10 equal to 0. And now these are basic one-step equations. To get x alone, we're going to subtract 4 here, subtract 10 here. Our solutions would be x equals negative 4 or x equals negative 10. You can solve a trinomial with a leading coefficient greater than 1 as well. So let's go through these steps really quickly again. We can't factor anything out, so we multiply leading coefficient and our constant. We list all the factors of 70. We pick the factor pair that's going to add or subtract to 9. So 5 and 14 are our factors. Plug them into our parentheses. Remember, your larger number, your larger factor, will go with that middle sign. So this becomes an m plus 14 and an m minus 5. Divide by the leading coefficient and simplify. So our first parenthesis simplifies to m plus 2, and our second parenthesis simplifies to 7m minus 5. And now we need to solve. So we set each piece equal to 0 right here and solve. On the left, it's a one-step equation, and we get m equals negative 2. Here on the right, we'd have to add 5 and then divide by 7, so we get m equals 5/7. Those are our two solutions.